Okay.
The Plainview Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the January 13, 2026 East St. Peter Township Planning Commission meeting. Call the meeting to order. To my far left is John Thompson. To my immediate left is Jansen Herr. I'm Randy Patterson, the chair. Sarah Ryder is absent this evening, and then Ryan Martin to my right. That makes up the Planning Commission. Jacob Bowen is our Director of Planning and Zoning Officer, and Lee Obitz is our Administrative Assistant running our technology. And Richard Scott is from Interplan.
Here with the Chick-fil-A project.
Okay, and so is Gabby. And Kathy?
That is correct. This is Richard Scott. Good evening.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
I can hear you well.
How
And this
about
is Gabby. Good evening.
Kathy, can you hear us?
Gabby, yes.
No, Kathy Cody. She might be muted. She is muted. Okay, I'm not gonna.
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our first item of business this evening is a reorganization of the Planning Commission. We do this annually. If it's okay with the rest of the Planning Commission members, I'll serve as a temporary chair for the election of officers. So we will elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. So we have 3 offices, we have 5 members. For the benefit of the members, Sarah did say that she is willing to serve as vice president or vice chair, continue serving in that capacity unless someone else would like to do that. So I will start off taking nominations for chair of the Planning Commission for 2026.
Are you still eligible?
I am still eligible and still welcome.
Okay, I would like to nominate Randy Patterson.
Second.
So nomination and second for Randy Patterson to be serve as chair. Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll close the nominations for chair. For vice chair, as I said, Sarah is willing to continue serving in that capacity unless Mr. Chair, I'll take him.
Motion for Sarah to serve as vice chair.
Vice chair, we have a second. We have a second by Jansen. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll close the nominations for vice chair and we'll move to secretary. Jansen is currently serving as our secretary in 2025. Is there a nomination for secretary?
I would just add that I will be stepping down in the first quarter of 2026, so I hope there is another nomination for secretary.
So it only leaves 2 people.
Second motion.
John, would you be willing to serve as secretary?
I would nominate John.
Second.
And seconds. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I will close the nominations for secretary. So our slate of officers for 2026 are myself, Randy Patterson as chair, Sarah Ryder as vice chair, John Thompson serving as secretary. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you very much. John, primarily the signature.
Thanks, man.
You have all received the minutes of the December 9th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any comments or concerns about those minutes? And if not, I'll accept a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Presented, okay, second.
I'll second that as presented.
Jansen is the second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Moving on to old business, we have none. So we will move to new business. Our first item of new business is Land Development Plan 2024-07 for Chick-fil-A restaurant at 2467 Lincoln Highway East. Do we have anyone representing them? Just our Zoom members, I'm assuming.
Yes, Richard Scott and Gabby will both be representing.
Okay, so normally what we ask you to do is do a brief overview of the function behind the project. And then I believe you should have a copy of the January 9th letter from David Miller Associates. We just ask you to address those issues that are in that letter. The Planning Commission, Planning Department for the county didn't really have any comments other than their signature block. So we'll dispense with those comments. So go ahead, Richard.
Yep, I'll give a brief description. This is a very simple project. There is already an operating Chick-fil-A store and drive-through on this site. What we're proposing to do is to add canopies over top of the locations for ordering and meal delivery. So there will be, you can kind of see the squares there on either the left side or the right side of the big rectangle in the center, which is the building. So we are proposing to put in canopies. Those are there for the safety and security of the team members. If you have not been to a Chick-fil-A before, they do have order takers and delivery team members that are out that do have iPads, and they are walking up and down the drive-through. So this canopy covers them and has fans and heaters in order to allow them to be safer and more comfortable outside in the elements. So that is kind of the gist of it. And adjacent to that, because of these improvements, one of the other improvements that we'll be doing is expanding the sidewalk. And I believe there's a waiver to discuss that as well. But there is a sidewalk on the south side along Lincoln Highway that is being proposed. There's already a sidewalk there. It's being removed and then shifted north further away from the right of way and expanded to, I believe, a 5-foot sidewalk as required. And that is all.
So in the David Miller Associates letter, don't really need to address the request for the preliminary plan waiver or for the size and scale of the drawing you presented, but could you address comment number 3 related to the sidewalk?
Absolutely. So we are requesting a waiver for this 5-foot sidewalk that's required along. You can see it from the cross sections on the right side of the screen that's being shared right now. There is a 4-foot wide landscape space and a 5-foot wide sidewalk that's required along the side of the road. And that is according to section 368-505-.e. Our request is there are, and along this entire Lincoln Highway side of the road, there are utility poles and other utilities that are that are actually already in place along the entire length of this street. And there is one pole that is within that required location for the sidewalk. So we are requesting, instead of there are some other, obviously there are other opportunities, but they would both either require the relocation of the utility pole and all of the connected utilities that are on there that is not owned by the applicant, or requiring us to find another solution. But essentially what we're looking for is to allow a small jog, a 4-foot, essentially. If we leave the utility pole in place, we would be able to still provide a 4-foot sidewalk in just that small location. So there would be a small jog around the utility pole, and then it would continue to a 5-foot wide sidewalk on either side. So maybe about a 2-foot long section of the sidewalk linearly that would not be 5 foot wide.
Can you identify on the drawing? This is the one at the intersection of Willowdale and Route 30?
It is on, if you can zoom in, whoever has control of the screen here, it's the call out towards the bottom right. It should be, once you get a little closer, I can see the number and I'll call it out. I think it's call out 14. Call out 16 on the bottom there. So you can see keep zooming in, it might be a little easier to read. So yeah, that's the small section right there. If you can see just north of the Route 30 call out on that plan.
The 2-foot section that you're looking to narrow to 4 feet.
Correct. Yeah, just it's a small portion that is jogging around that existing utility pole.
So can I ask you to comment on the ADA requirements that you have a minimum sidewalk of 4 feet? How do you address wheelchair and pedestrian walking at that section?
So ADA requirements are requiring a 36-inch for handicap accessibility. So that'd be allowed within that 4 foot.
Okay.
We would exceed that by a foot.
And the other comment was financial security, and that's been addressed. Satisfaction of David Miller Associates. Questions from the planning commission member?
I'm gathering from the wording here and looking at the drawings, I'm gathering that there is insufficient space on the south side of where the walkway will be for a 5-foot width to be carved out around the utility pole. Is that accurate? There would not be space on the south side to just keep the 5-foot width there?
That is correct. There is supposed to be a 5-foot wide landscaping separation from the back of the curb along the road to the sidewalk. And that's just based on the ordinance requiring this. So it's not allowed to jog in that direction. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
And I'll ask the question in the other direction. Can you jog around the utility pole?
So we have considered that as well, and that was the other situation. So if we were to jog around the pole the other direction, you can kind of see that gray line to the right of the pole there. There is a water meter and water service, and there is also a very large grade change. There's about 3 foot of grade change between where the sidewalk will be going. So in order to create ADA grades, we would need to install around a 2-foot retaining wall, which would be right on top of our service line, which would require us to relocate that water service. By relocating that water service, we'd have to shut down the store, which is not the intention. So that's why we're asking for relief from providing the sidewalk.
Can I ask you related to the suggestion that be denied?
Yes, so discussion with township staff, given this project being within the Route 30 streetscape plan, the township is still in favor of having that waiver denied.
And your solution is to relocate the pole?
So the sidewalk would still go behind the pole, but I think the concern was over that water service line. So the township is still in favor of that water service line being relocated. The pole would still remain.
Any other comments from the planning commission? Comments from the public? To my knowledge, the only 3 people are on Zoom are related to supporting this project, correct?
Not 100%.
Kathy, are you here for this project?
No,
or-
I'm just here to be an informed citizen. I'm really just here just
You
to know
have a-
what's going on in my township. That was my New Year's resolution, to be more informed. So no, I don't have an opinion one way or another.
No question.
Nope.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, so we have the DMA letter dated January 9th, 2026, which we recommend granting of the waiver for preliminary plan processing, the granting of the waiver for scale of the final plan. It does recommend a denial of the sidewalk request, that modification to change it to a 4-foot wide sidewalk. And then the financial security is addressed, and there are no comments from the planning commission, planning department, and the county. So I will look to the planning commission members for direction. There's a recommendation, Kathy. This is a recommendation that's made to the Board of Supervisors. It is not the final decision on the plan itself.
We'll make a motion to approve on the DMA letter dated January 9th. Make a motion to approve the waivers and modifications as written here in the letter. Also include a specific, I would also make a motion to approve the 4-foot carve out around the pole. Seems like the considering the finances involved and the fact that it still meets ADA requirements, given the potential financial ramifications involved of making them move the pole or making them install the retaining wall and shutting down the store for a day. Seems like that would be too great a cost to bear, considering the options.
So we have a motion to approve land development plan 2024-07. Recommend its approval to the Board of Supervisors in accordance with the DMA letter dated January 9th, 2026, with the exception of the recommended denial of the modification for the width of the sidewalk. The motion is to permit that modification. Second? Second. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further conversation from the members of the board? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you so much.
We will move to land development plan 2025-31 for Clark Associates at 2257 Philadelphia. You have representing Ryan's benefit. This is a land development plan that has been approved. This is a small modification to that land development plan. Please introduce yourself and just a brief overview of what you're doing, and then if you can address any comments from David Miller.
Thank you. Christopher Archick from the ES Associates here in Moncton. I'm here tonight to talk about the project, the subject of Project Clark, specifically called storage building. As was described, there was a greater land development plan recently that was approved and construction is underway. If you've seen it directly across township at 2207. In one light industrial zoning district, the overall fact that the application on acreage. But you can screen there, what we're talking about is a very small area within that property where originally on the prior land development plan, the approval was over, put it there. As things to do in business, they did identify more urgent needs for the business. Which is shown there in that white rectangle within that red box, which is a storage. So what we've done is we've simply removed the location of solar panels, replacing it with that shed structure. It basically drops in right along that existing curb line that was proposed as part of the other plan. It does take out 4 parking spaces, but some of you may recall from the last plan, there was an excess of parking. So we have more than we need in terms of parking. There is no water or sewer service to this structure. It's not going to be an occupied structure other than temporarily when someone's going in there for equipment, they can live in and out or storage and so forth. So it really is just a supplemental building. The building is proposed at about 5,000 square feet, so roughly 50 by 100. There is no impact to stormwater management because again, this area had already been designed for impervious area. When we reran the calculations, it essentially doesn't move the needle, so to speak, with stormwater management. However, we were in touch with the Conservation District just to keep everybody in the loop with what was being proposed. And we have documentation that was provided in the application. That's the PDS permit. Again, primarily because we're not changing anything. We're not changing any stormwater management facilities. It's all within the original limit of disturbance. There was one comment from the internet, was the question about what do we impact the parking? So again, we have surplus of parking, so that's not an issue. It was filed as a land development plan, and given the scale of the project, we did request a waiver instead of previous plan applications. We do have a letter from DMA dated December 30th, where they note their favor of approval of that waiver. The only other comment was related to your date of approval and go forward. And then in terms of subdivision land development, just getting feedback from emergency services, which we do already have any service feedback and or getting feedback and more. So that's the application kind of summary, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is this a walk-in storage facility?
So we'll have a garage door, and I believe also a main door. So yeah, we walk into the building, you know, take equipment out or put equipment in.
Questions from the planning commission?
Chris, you answered my questions. Parking goes and the stormwater. I'm just curious about what percentage of the solar panels are going to be eliminated with this?
Just that corner, I mean, graphically looking at that. 15%, 10%.
Other than that, I've addressed your questions.
Any questions from the public? Kathy, any questions?
No,
Thank you. Hearing none, I look for motions from the planning commission related to land development plan 2025-31 for Clark Associates at 2257 Old Philadelphia Pike. You have the December 30th, 2025 letter from DMA. You have the February 5th letter from the planning department, which really has already been addressed. So I'll leave it to those two letters.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of project 2025-31. Move the comment of the county. I would like to recommend approval subject to those letters.
Is there a second? The seconds the motion. Members, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Development for high steel structures at 1915 Old Philadelphia Pike. Yeah, good. I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Yes, again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the project. I do have Dave Boyd on the field joining me tonight if you have operational questions. But the purpose of why we're here this evening is for, again, a very small project where they're just looking to respond to the demand of the business. Obviously, High Steel, a long time operator in business in township, and trying to adapt to the demands of their business. They're just looking to have a small, really what we're calling a lean-through section of structure attached to the existing structure. So this property is at 1915 Old Philadelphia Pike. Will be on the west side of Route 30. It's in the I-2 General Industrial Zone. The whole parent tract is about 27.3 acres. And we've submitted a stormwater management plan, essentially just to cover what's being proposed here to document the change in condition out there. What they're proposing, you can see there on the plan, kind of like the white washed out area is what I'll call existing building out there. If you're familiar with the property, it's a lot of paved area, stone area. So what they're proposing to do is construct essentially a 6-foot wide, like 40-foot long addition to the building. And it's really just to house some special equipment used to manufacture their products. It's really to allow safe maneuverability around that equipment and machinery. The height of that would only be about 10 feet, so less than what the existing structure is out there right now. It is, as again, situated on that north side over existing impervious surface. So we're not introducing any new impervious. But interestingly, because of just the way the regulations are written with DEP and so forth, and the township ordinance, we do have to accommodate, kind of making up for past sins. We have to accommodate the impervious that we are showing there. So we have to take a portion of that percentage, that which is essentially 20%, and we have to essentially remove that impervious from the site today. So it's basically a swap. We're removing, this plan documents the removal and requires the applicant to remove 48 square feet of the area and make that a full impervious condition, which this plan does. With that, again, we are requesting some modifications associated with the application. The first being, given the scope of the project and the fact that it is just a stormwater exercise, there's nothing to do here with traffic. We're not adding additional employees, equipment. It doesn't really make sense from a development standpoint. So we requested modifications on a preliminary plan application, on a plan application, and then related specific to the stormwater management ordinance. Just given what we tried to depict here on the plans, making it legible, we're asking for a modification of plan scale to go from 50 feet to 60 feet. And then boundary descriptions is something you would typically have when you have a more detailed program. Not doing anything other than 50 to 40 graphic that we have in the middle of the site. And then just to be thorough, in a stormwater management plan, typically a carbonate assessment is required. So if you're proposing, say, a stormwater management facility and we're proposing infiltration, we just want to make sure that the ground can absorb that, what we're showing in our calculations. In this case, we're not introducing a facility, we're just removing impervious. So we have a pervious surface. So we ask for a waiver of the carbonate geology report. We do have the January 8th DMA review. They are in support of the modifications that I just walked through. And then as far as the balance of their comments, we don't have any objections or concerns to address those. So, both of you are the proposed.
One thing I'd like to add to, so some of the people from the team, like myself, and David Miller, it was presented to us also that this plan would not be increasing any production capacity. If that's correct, that's
correct.
So this new equipment, I think, was just you were updating equipment, and you're not introducing equipment for increasing your production.
That's correct. It's a CNC, so the computer's outdated. So we purchased a new one. It's exactly the same, other than one of the cabinets is physically bigger than the old one. So we lost our safe walkway, if you want to say. So we're proposing to go out 6 feet so we can safely walk around the bigger cabinet. And the new equipment does not impose in the new structure in any way.
That's something the township looks at when we do kind of pre-application before it comes here, is if this is going to increase production at a site, there's going to be more employees, more impact. That's something that we look at to consider.
So from the planning commission perspective, the only request is the waiver of land development.
Correct. So some of those waivers mentioned is not something that you guys would be granted.
I just want to make sure, because we did not have the DMA letter.
Yeah, the DMA review was not part of the waiver land development.
So for our business, we are looking at the request of relief, which is a waiver of the subdivision land development ordinance related to the building expansions and still filing a stormwater management plan that meets township requirements. Questions? Questions from the public? Kathy?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Hearing no questions or comments, discussion, I'll look for action by the planning commission on 2025-33, a waiver of land development planning for high steel structures at 1915 Old Philadelphia Pike, outlined in their December 24th, 2025 letter.
I make a motion for planning with high steel to approve their request for a waiver of land for the new plan noted and as outlined in their RGS letter dated December 24th, 2025.
The second. that, any final discussion related to the matter? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? So moved. Thank you. On to briefing items. The development plan 2026-1 for Lancaster Mennonite Lancaster Mennonite School at 2176 Lincoln Highway East. Jacob?
Okay, so for this project, we're going to prepare the Mennonite, they are looking to convert part of their outdoor walkway that has a roof over it, so they're gonna expand their admin offices into that area. And they're also gonna construct a vestibule area, increasing the building footprint by slightly under 200 square feet. And they're gonna remove a little over 1,000 square foot of impervious area, for the project, so somewhat minor land development plan.
Okay. Any questions? We'll move to other business, which is a comprehensive plan presentation by HRG. As a planning commission, have received a draft of the comprehensive plan complete. In November, we discussed it that's briefly at our December meeting, and we asked for presentation from HRG on the comprehensive plan, and I've asked them, they have a PowerPoint that they'll go through, but I've asked them to focus their attention on our comments at the December 3rd meeting and any other comments they've received since then from us and staff, and focus on the recommendations. So I will leave it to you to introduce yourself, and please, the floor is yours.
Try to do it, but there. There we go. Cable. Might have to invite them. Okay.
If that's not, I can just go through the comments that I've received.
I'm scared it'll interrupt the Zoom meeting if we take it off here.
Yeah. Okay. Copy, and Brian has his on his computer, I think, so, hey, do you want to refer to as you go through your comment? You can do it that way.
Or is it just going through some parts on the?
You can follow. If not, that's. Okay, thanks. Good evening. I'm Dean Severson. I'm the lead consultant for the comprehensive plan. And first of all, I want to thank staff and our steering committee for all their hard work. Had a lot of meetings, a lot of input, and I appreciate all the comments that we've received. It really was invaluable, the amount of input that we had. We were also able to get some community input. Just as a background, we had one survey which didn't quite work out. It was a visual preference survey, unfortunately. For whatever reason, we just didn't get the response that we wanted. We had another survey that we helped, that Jacob put out. We've also had a public meeting, and we also had a questionnaire survey go out to fire companies, and we also did some interviews of the township staff, representatives from High, representatives from county planning, some other folks as well. So we tried to get some input from both the community and from some interviews that we had as well. Just kind of going through myself a few notes here. The unique thing about this comprehensive plan, opposed to other plans that we've worked on, is that the amount of work that it was already done in terms of planning studies, various plan elements. A lot of work has already been done, and not only that, it's been done fairly recently as well. We were able to incorporate the housing from the housing study, the findings from the Bridgeport Transportation Land Use Study, the Lincoln Highway Streetscape Plan. There's been a fairly recent Parks and Rec plan. So there were a lot of things, and then also there was a recalibration of the growth management of the urban growth boundary in the township as well, that the township has gone through with Lancaster County planning. So there was quite a bit of work for us to incorporate into the plan. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that we didn't replicate anything that was already done. Didn't make sense to spend time on some of those things, especially things that are very recently done. Our job more is to find the areas that maybe there were gaps, and then also try to provide some coordination, some integration between the elements that have already been done, seeing if there's overlaps, seeing if there's things that we could recommend, which would make sense for each of those sections. So that's kind of what we did. First off, to start off, we have the future land use plan. Not only did we take the work that the county did in recalibrating the growth boundaries, and the board had adopted it in October during the middle of the process, so we were able to incorporate the boundaries themselves. But we also took a look at re-examining what the land use categories are that future land use plan. And what I wanted to do was to make sure that we, if at all possible, try to make sure that the future land use plan categories were consistent with zoning districts. You don't want to be having situations where, if somebody says, hey, you've got me, I'm zoned to this, but now all of a sudden in the plan it says that. So now you have to rezone my, because that's what your conflict is. Try to avoid those kinds of problems with the township. So in particular, the ag and the residential districts all stayed the same. In terms of the commercial and those types of categories, the neighborhood mixed use is a new land use category. We combined the existing C1 neighborhood and the mixed use zoning district kind of together. They're fairly, I don't want to say similar, but there was some overlap in those districts, so we figured it would make sense to combine those. Industrial light, industrial general, those are the same as the zoning district. We have a campus education in its category. It's for the back campus. It makes sense to include that. Previously, it's in the I2 industrial, which I understand that's how it happened, but we decided that it would make a little bit more sense to include a designation for that. One of the comments that we had from Planning Commission that we noticed with the village districts, was again, we tried to keep them mostly the same. The Burke Hamlet is a unique zoning district. Makes sense to have that as a unique kind of land use category, so we kept that. The village mixed use, we combined the existing general and village commercial zoning districts. Both of those districts kind of look for a mix of residential, non-residential uses, similar types of uses, similar types of requirements, and we kind of combined those two. The village residential kept that the same as the village residential zoning. The only difference is the village center, which is the Bridgeport recommendation. The reason we include that, because again, it's not quite like the other villages, but the recommendation in the Bridgeport study was to have that as a village center zoning district. So I figured, okay, if that's what is in the zoning district, maybe that would make sense to include it as a future land use category as well. Trying to make sure that we had consistency between your existing planning documents and kind comprehensive plan. And that's the other thing, that we also did was with the, Route 30 streetscape, study. There are 5 land use plan categories in there. So I figured it makes sense. Let's incorporate those into the comprehensive plan, have it consistent. So we've got the Route 30 funnel, Western Gateway, tourism, locally serving, and Eastern Gateway. That was a pretty quick section. I'll stop right there and ask if there's any questions with this part so far. Okay. The village strategy, we didn't make many changes. We went back, I was with the county actually when the last plan was created with the Conestoga Valley comp plan. And I think the village strategy was a great thing really for the time. Recognize the fact that you have historic villages in the township and creating specific strategies and zoning districts for them. So we went back and decided, steering committee, we're not going to make any changes in those zoning districts. Only minor changes in the boundaries, which were recommended in the growth area recalibrations, that's included. The one series of recommendations we had for these is that obviously with these neighborhoods, these villages, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic in the area. There's buggy traffic in the area, there's bike traffic in the area. And of course, you've got major roadways with a lot of traffic along there. So one of the things we noticed is that there's a real need for bike ped improvements in those areas. So we have some recommendations in here with looking at the width and condition of sidewalks along roads. Extending sidewalks in Sellersburg, 8-foot shoulders along Route 30 around Route 340. So again, we tried to make sure that we were looking at the villages themselves and the uses themselves. We aren't really recommending any changes, but let's see if we can try to make them a little better, a little safer for bike pedaling. Okay. The next piece, and this, I know there's a lot that I had from the commission in terms of the housing chapter. One of the things that I think was a good recommendation I saw in your comments was maybe, I think we relied on the housing study to be kind of serve as the chapter itself, as a housing chapter. I think what might be a better idea, I think there was a recommendation to include reference or included in the appendix, if you will, include reference in the chapter to the housing study. And then include in the chapter itself some of the recommendations, some of the comments that you had in reference to the housing study. So I think that's what we're going to do, is to move the study out and have a reference there, and then try to expand and incorporate the comments that you had for the housing chapter. So I've read the comments, but if you want to open up for any additional comments at this point. Housing chapter. Yes. One comment I have, Dean, is looking at the buildable land areas and looking at the housing chapter and considering that this is for a 10-year plan, comprehensive plan. While it could be adopted, they're usually 10-year timeframes that you're looking at. And the housing study kind of focused on 5-year period, as opposed to a 10-year period. But the buildable area recommendations are tied to the housing study, which is a 5-year period. So I'm just curious what you see as the potential of additional comment in the housing chapter that looks beyond that period that's really addressed in the housing study regarding housing needs and buildable land, that type of thing. Yeah, I think, and again, I can give you the stock answer that you always hear is that once you get beyond a certain amount of time, of course, housing forecasting is less and less accurate. But still, I think the general trend is that there's going to continue to be a demand that is in place over 5 years. is probably gonna be mostly replicated over 10. I think would be a safe assumption. So I think that's a good point when saying, what does that mean in terms of the buildable land? I think overall, that's always gonna be a question in, especially in Lancaster County with the housing demand and the growth that we have here, and with the amount of land that is available within growth boundaries, we aren't really looking at a lot of greenfield development. And as the years go by, it's going to be less and less of having greenfield development, and the opportunities are going to have to be for redevelopment and looking at things a little bit differently, maybe looking at mix of commercial and residential districts in certain areas, creating that type of thing. I saw one of the recommendations, obviously, is it makes sense to have kind of the Rockville Square type development that we're looking at makes sense for as the township develops and redevelops into the future. So I think that is kind of the gist of the recommendations that we would have to have. Comments and conversation in December was about density. And the density that the county is looking for, and I think the supervisors have at least tacitly approved that density measure. But when you're looking at 4-acre sites and the density required within the urban growth boundaries, our conversation was the pushback that you would potentially receive from neighbors that are currently single-family homes, duplexes, not really ready to accept high-rise development and that type of thing. So I think that's what my concern about the housing chapter is most focused on, our ability to make sure that we make the best opportunity of zoning changes within those buildable areas to really get the density that we need to meet the housing demand that we have. Right. It was kind of like in the old days, if you will, saying that if you don't get the density that you needed within your residential areas, you're going to put it out into your ag areas. It's that same sort of the redevelopment you're going to be pushing into the residential neighborhoods if you don't do it efficiently. So, any other comments on the housing section? I just think it's one. We focused on the 90% of our employees here don't live here; they commute in. So thinking about again that need for housing and the type of housing. I have another comment I'll save for Jacob later. It's not really related to the comprehensive plan, but it looks at regulations about unrelated individuals living in a home and allowing for shared home. I think the story was Golden Girls would not be permitted today in most locations in Lancaster County. Thanks, Steve. Go ahead. Sure. Next piece is the economic base. Again, there were some recommendations we have from other many studies. I looked at quite a bit of the Lincoln Highway in Lancaster, BID, and some of the actions that they're proposing. But I think one of the recommendations I saw here, well, first of all, we did talk about the higher density residential development in terms of a mixed use in C1s and C2s, and looking at the redevelopment that's going to occur in areas. And then also, we looked at was, it was brought up a few times by the steering committee, was the Lancaster Archery Center and the mixed use that they have there, the integrated business campus. And the thought was that, it sounds like a pretty good type of proposal. But we see if we can expand that into other districts. So we're looking at that to see one. Again, flexibility for some of the economic development. The third point, something that I noticed and I want to expand on, is the terms of redevelopment of some of the vacant and underperforming obsolete properties. And I just focused on motels. I think it's a good point that really the conversation should be about any underperforming uses. If there's code issues or bringing them back on the tax rolls or whatever, that should be expanded into any type of use. And I think that the important thing is who are the actors that we can get to play to work on that redevelopment efforts. I think that the BID is a good one to look at. If we're looking at the EDC, be another good recommendation. But again, it's not an easy thing, and the market will take care of some of the demand for what that redevelopment is going to look like. I guess the question always is what's the township's role in that kind of a redevelopment effort? If you provide more of a proactive role, do you allow the market and some of the nonprofit actors to take the role? That's kind of the question for the township to look at in the future, to see how aggressive you want to be.
Okay, just for the benefit of the public, so BID is a business improvement district along East St. Peter or Lincoln Highway. And EDC is the Economic Development Company in Lancaster County that drives a lot of the business and industrial development throughout the county.
Thanks, Rick.
I live those acronyms, so I know them, but not everybody does. The mayor always used to say that's why he hired me, so I could explain the acronyms to it.
Can't live without freaking that. Transportation improvements. Obviously there was
I just want to make sure that we're correct. In several different areas, you make the statement on mixed use buildings. Residential first floor, commercial above. That's the flip, right? Okay.
and it's amazing how many times I did that wrong.
Thank you.
Right, a good conversation.
Yes, it did.
And afterwards I kind of went, yeah. Okay. Transportation chapter. Obviously, we start off with a discussion of what's on the, here's another acronym, the transportation improvement plan. For the county, the projects that are listed there for improvements. And there's also an emphasis on multimodal transportation improvements. And that again is both the transportation other than automobiles, bike, ped, horse, any kind of other types of transportation modes, and trying to provide for each of those, and then also trying to coordinate, integrate all of those modes. Well, that's important. So again, we looked at what's out there currently, and we also started to look at some of the recommendations for improvements as well. We have a number of, I would say, higher level recommendations and some more specific ones. I can go through what I have and we can go into some of the conversation or some of the recommendations that you have. We're looking at some of the things that came up quite a bit. I know Tara mentioned was the implementation of the adaptive signal controls on Route 340, which will coordinate with the one which is on Route 30. Coordination with surrounding municipalities to develop trails, bike credit connections. That's a continuing effort. I know that you're more or less successful working with some neighbors in terms of extending those connections. One of the things I saw was really a good resource that was really helpful was the township's has a sidewalk survey of all sidewalks in the township. And one of the recommendations is to evaluate existing conditions, accessibility, gaps, all those type of things that you would usually do with the sidewalk study. The information is digitized and geolocated, so it's really a good survey. So I think, one of the things is to use that survey to identify barriers to access, ADA accessibility, prioritize improvements, those types of things. The township also has a very good list of sidewalk referrals that has to be brought into at some point to be implemented, all those sidewalk referrals. And again, sidewalks are when developers do request waivers of sidewalks on subdivision plans. Oftentimes planning commissions and municipalities grant those waivers and they say sometime in the future you're going to have to do it. And township has a list of those. One of the things that was mentioned that we discussed a bit was an access management ordinance to provide access not only for properties getting onto the main roadway, but also sharing internal access. So you can have shared driveways rear access, a variety of different things that you could have. And I thought that was one of the recommendations that the town doesn't have that currently. That would be a good recommendation to have. Some of the more specific things we had that came up during discussion by the steering committee, access management measures between Mount Sydney Road and Pursuit Road. A couple of extensions to having east-west connections between 30 and 340 as potential extensions of the roadways there. One was Pennsylvania Avenue and Chateau Hill Road. And there was another one on Ohio Avenue. Both of those areas are located between 30 and 340, which could potentially provide for some relief. But again, of course, you're talking about existing residential neighborhoods. So you're going to have an issue with some of that. Talked a little bit about the sidewalk survey to look at conditions and gaps in the villages of Bronx and Sellersburg. And then also looking at measures to increase safe connections from residential areas. I know Tara mentioned that there was a walking school bus already. The township is funding for school crosswalks, which could be maintained by the township. So again, there are alternatives to provide for safer transportation modes for all. Any discussion, any questions on the transportation section? Okay. The next section was the infrastructure piece. And I'm glad this was a good comment I got from the planning commission that was really helpful. Is my short-sighted thought, I was thinking more of just typical infrastructure, sewer, water, stormwater. And the township is doing quite a bit already. There wasn't really a lot to say on those issues. Actually, their stormwater system and some of the things that they're doing is phenomenal. I guess the recommendation for the planning commission was take a look at some of the other recommendations for instance, resilient and sustainable infrastructure. We do talk about that in the comp plan. Things like green infrastructure for rain gardens, sustainable transportation through like EV charging. I know there's a question about EV charging, whether that really makes sense in the township. Resilient building practices like green buildings, permeable pavements, a lot of those types of things. And then some of the other things that ordinarily you might not think about in terms of infrastructure, but things like water trails, greenway access, or water access possibilities, which are also, of course, Department of Rec recommendations. Looking at some of the recommendations from the Lincoln Highway Plan, and then also the Bridgeport study. For instance, there was a recommendation for trail connections, bike ped facilities in these areas as well. A trail along the Conestoga River for the Bridgeport study. So again, their natural resource recommendations, their infrastructure recommendations, and their transportation recommendations all kind of wrapped together, which again was kind of the purpose of the plan, is to combine these.
Yeah, I would say one of the challenges is if you read the narrative of the plan, you use the term infrastructure in a lot of different places, like the bike paths or infrastructure. And then you get to the infrastructure implementation section and it's blank. So I don't know if there's a different word to use or to make references then in that recommendation section to those other chapters instead of recopying things. But I think that's part of the challenge to Kathy, if I may use Kathy. If you read the word infrastructure throughout the plan, and then you see a implementation section that has infrastructure and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
That it just starts to go through your mind. What are we talking about then? So I think that was the gist of my comment there about why is it empty, and maybe it's a reference point to other sections so people can refer back to other parts.
Yeah, I think that's helpful in any planning document to take a look and see that it does go beyond just the hard concrete sewer water infrastructure.
Any other comments? Can we flip to the recommendations section?
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of comments about the other sections, in December, so if we could just switch to kind of a review of this, implementation chapter, I think that would be a good place, unless some.
If you want us to do Roberta?
And I guess we talk about the villages and agricultural areas. I think my comment was, we focused on Ronson with all connection. But I know we've had land development plans before the commission in Birmingham, where we've had comments about gaps in the sidewalk in Birmingham and access on one side, we have high sidewalks, but on the other side, there's no sidewalks, there's no crosswalks to safely get a pedestrian to the other side of the street. So I just had a general comment in the villages and agricultural areas that, what about Birmingham? What about Smithtown? And instead of just focusing on and with.
Okay. I did reference the meeting hotels. There was a question about the page 107, the rental inspection program is proposed.
Yeah, so on the hotel issue, it's just, I think we need to make sure that the business this spot. Because you're talking about commercial properties along the Lincoln Highway. And you just created that business improvement district, and part of that is assessments to make improvements. They certainly would want to play a role, I think, in how motels might be repurposed. And then for me, the rental inspection program was focused again on the motels, but I know the housing plan talked about inspection programs in the township. So I think maybe consideration, whether it's in this draft or it's further conversation with the supervisors, but since we're talking 10 years down the pike, I understand that we can't do it right away because of resourcing and everything, but I think it should be in the comprehensive plan. Back to your comment about underutilized and vacant properties. So not focusing just on motels, but throughout the township, having an inspection program that also allows us to address the condition of those properties.
And the question on page 109, the sidewalk system for two neighborhoods that do not have significant foot traffic, Meadow Ridge Drive and Waterford. Why is this deemed a priority in these areas instead of other more pressing infrastructure and roadway improvements? And to tell you the truth, I was trying to go back and I don't remember. Maybe I can even tap Jacob to see if he remembers why that came up in the conversation. I can't remember.
That was me that submitted that. I live in that area. I'm a runner. I run around those areas all the time. I never see anybody else out there that run. So I was just curious on why that was a focus, because there's a lot of other in the document that was highlighted.
Yeah.
It was just very random.
Yeah, sometimes there's comments from some members of the steering committee and they're saying, yeah, it would make a good idea if we did. And I just can't pinpoint where that one.
Trying to think back.
Both of those areas don't have, like, they're not throughways. So like the Meadow Ridge, like there's no one driving through there. The only people that are in there are people who live there. And the other area, the Waterford, like same deal. It's a dead end back there, at least as it is currently. Now, if that farm behind there gets developed, that's a whole other subject. But it's a dead end back there. Really wide streets. The only people that are there are people that live there, and me running.
The flip side, I guess my question then would be for you is, with that one recommendation that we just had about the possible extension of east-west alternate routes that could possibly go through residential areas, there's always that concern about bringing additional traffic in. Or is there any concern that you had in terms of that, or you think that that could be worked out through if that did get constructed?
No, I mean, my comment here was, I know it's a repeat, but under the implementation recommendation, the fact that we don't mention Smoketown, Bridgeport, or Burtonhead just seems like an omission to me. And instead of just focusing on Waterford, I mean, we have a lot of neighborhoods, neighborhood I live in, that don't have sidewalks. Across the street, there are no sidewalks, and they're not through neighborhoods. They're
Correct.
dead-end neighborhoods. So I think maybe addressing that to those areas that are through neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I think is probably the key.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that's a good kind of bow tie on that. It's the redirect of the focus on sidewalk networks away from Waterford and Meadow Ridge and on into the communities that Randy highlighted there just now. Because those are major thoroughfares for buggies, bicyclists, cars, and yeah, those would be the areas where the sidewalk networks would need to be improved on and expanded, rather than these dead end networks that these areas where there's no traffic.
So it's Smoketown, Burtonham, and Bridgeport. Yeah, right.
Visiting the Smoketown, I've been there about 10 years and I've seen an increase of pedestrian traffic. And I figured myself that it's very difficult to.
Yeah, again.
Yeah, and you hear people say, well, nobody's out there walking, but you can see that, and there are destinations, especially in a place like Smoketown, there are origins of destinations obviously there. So people are going to be walking.
There's a bus stop just one property away, and there's no place to stand. I mean, it's just one hillside, so sidewalk might be nice.
Any other questions on the implementation section or anything else in the plan?
I had a question on the implementation section, on that Horseshoe Road, Mount Singular Horseshoe Road. Is that, you foresee that utilizing an existing pathway, or is that creating a new?
Existing if possible.
There is a private lane that's. Wasn't sure what was seen as the future for that.
Okay.
Where's the comment? Sorry.
Page 1, there's one interaction.
I do want to come back to one comment you brought up earlier, on the bus connectors, in free form.
I would say that, just for the record, that would need to be looked at real carefully from a planning perspective. That's a really crazy area, and trying to jam traffic between those two roads, 340 and 30, using this connector in a residential area. Yeah, that seems like something that we need to be done with a lot of forethought.
So they probably keep the recommendation, but really stress that it have to be looked at in great detail in terms of respecting the neighborhood and safety and.
Yeah, comments from residents and making sure that we're not,
Other areas rather than using an existing.
correct.
Other comments from the planning commission? We take the next steps.
Yeah, so just to give Dean a heads up as well and planning commission, so there is more. The township's held back on more comments. There's more comments going to be coming from you from the township side. Give the community, the planning commission opportunity to give comments as well, because this isn't a document, it just comes from the township, of course. So I think we're gonna be working through this draft. And next steps will be this will be moved to the Board of Supervisors. They're not yet ready for it at this point. There is a new board that will be getting them up to speed, and we'll be working on incorporating these comments into another draft, revised draft at some point.
Is there another public meeting?
So we don't have anything scheduled. At this
And either at the supervisor position point in time when we're close to looking at a final draft, is there any other opportunity at that point for public comment?
I mean, at the supervised meeting, of course, there'll be open comment, but at this point, we don't have a special meeting scheduled for comment.
Do you anticipate coming back to this body with the additional additions that the township staff may have?
We don't have a recommendation at this point. That would be something for the planning commission to consider if you want to see additional comment or not.
I think we could comment on the staff's comments.
Okay.
From a planning commission perspective, I don't know that we need to see another version of the draft.
Words in your mouth, but do you recommend that the draft be forwarded to the board?
This draft?
Yeah, with,
Not yet.
okay, I meant with those revisions.
I mean, yeah, I think if we see staff comments and yes, I do think there would be a point in time where the planning commission would make a recommendation to the supervisors. Yeah.
After we.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll be working on those, Jake, and on the ones that I've got so far, and I'll be waiting for the ones that you gotta come in.
Just waiting to get planning commission first and then.
Okay.
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it. And for Ryan, Jason was our planning commission representative on this hearing. We don't have any other items of business. There is in front of you a state ethics commission form. You do need to fill that out and get it back to Jacob. It's possible. Yes. The new date. When you have to make first, because I have to new date, it will be changed by the township. It is a state ethics form, but it is not sent to the state. That in their file. You can go online, the State Ethics Commission, there's a PDF fillable form. And you can send that to Jacob, but if you could get that as soon as possible, and the answers to the questions are 2025. So it's not going forward, it's what happened in 2025. You were appointed in 2025, so you still have to file. Read the instructions. Else, go to the order. Commission members, go to the order.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second then.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. So moved. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Kathy.